Welcome to this episode of Real Talk. My name is Christy Ivy. I'm the founder and president of Christy's Cause, a nonprofit in Southwest Florida working to eradicate child sex trafficking and exploitation. Today we will be discussing changing mindsets, a trauma-informed approach, with our guest Sergeant Wade Williams with the Collier County Sheriff's Office, Francine Donaromo, SVU Chief with the State Attorney's Office, and Joanne Medinilla, Executive Director with Into the Jordan. Each one of you brings extensive experience in anti-sex trafficking work from a law enforcement perspective, as well as prosecution standpoint, and a local nonprofit perspective supporting victims of sex trafficking. Thank you guys for joining us today. Joanne, what type of vulnerabilities have you seen in the survivors you work with?
Well, you know, if you close your eyes and you think about the vulnerabilities that you see in your community, poverty, runaways, homelessness, traffickers see that too. And so they're going to prey on that, and they're going to offer them those things that they need. You know, the women that come into the Jordan oftentimes suffer from complex trauma, from, childhood sexual abuse. Actually, 90% of survivors report that they have been sexually abused as children and or raped by the age of 13.
Wow.
So, they have a lot of things going against them, but, that's where we can step in and kind of offer them the help that they need.
What have survivors that you've worked with expressed as possible barriers that they have felt in getting help?
Most of them don't know that there are resources available to help them. They are self-medicating, using drugs just to get through whatever they have to do to get their basic needs met. So, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, and they just don't know where to turn. They've often burned all their bridges, they don't have family, they don't have healthy relationships. So, it's difficult for them to kind of reach out and know who to reach out to.
Wow. I mean, it's heartbreaking, honestly.
It really is.
That gives us great insight into the mindset of a victim at the time law enforcement steps on the scene. Sergeant Williams, you and your unit really operate in a trauma-informed manner. Can you tell us some of the ways you've trained your unit to be trauma-informed?
Sure, Christy. So our unit works directly with human trafficking victims. We do investigations for crimes of human trafficking, internet crimes against children, and missing persons. Human trafficking is a crime of exploitation, and exploitation is all about the vulnerability of the victim. We know from FBI research and from our own experience that predators, specifically traffickers, choose their victims based on vulnerability, availability, and desirability in that order.
Wow.
We've found, particularly with the domestic sex trafficking victims, that they follow this blueprint. And we see typically they have a history of what she was just discussing, of a lot of DCF involvement regarding neglect, abuse, sexual exploitation, or sexual abuse as a child. We see that they start running away at a certain age. Usually a child is running away from something or running to something if they're running away. And so we recognize that these girls are in a state of crisis and there's something going on with them. We call them high-risk victims. Okay, so when we deal with girls like this, we understand that they're not going to be your typical kind of victim. Most of them are very reluctant to respond to questioning, particularly from law enforcement. They're very difficult to get disclosures from. So we have a variety of different procedures we've put into place. For example, our high-risk victim identification assessment model at the Collier County Sheriff's Office, where we will have questions that are gauged to not be too intrusive, but also get the information that we're looking for. We partner with our Children's Advocacy Center and the Child Protection Team, which includes DCF. And we'll do CPT interviews if necessary, which are also not leading, and they're meant to kind of get information in a positive way and get them involved in counseling, so that if they also don't feel comfortable disclosing initially in the beginning, that they might come out later during counseling and that sort of thing. And our detectives understand that this is a process, and that building rapport is the most important thing.
Wow, that's powerful. Do you feel, in your experience, that victims always see themselves as victims?
No, it's very rare that they will self-identify as a victim. Usually by the time they get down that path and they get to that stage, they have been manipulated substantially by a lot of people in their lives over the course of their life, but particularly at that moment when the crime is occurring where they're being exploited by the trafficker. Many times they're in love with the trafficker. They think the trafficker is their boyfriend. They call him their boyfriend. The trafficker has promised them, all kinds of things, the world, as much money as they can imagine and all the dreams that they can possibly imagine, particularly though, not just monetary or tangible things, but love and affection, these things that they've been missing, which are the vulnerabilities that they identify. So they look for these vulnerabilities, they look for these girls. Now anybody can be a victim, but they look for these girls, and it is primarily girls, women and children that are trafficked. But they look for these girls that are suffering from these vulnerabilities, that are runaways and throwaways and have family issues or foster kids and that sort of thing, and they target those because they're more susceptible and easier to target.
Wow. Do you feel that the victims you've worked with always seek justice for themselves?
No, absolutely not. It's our responsibility in law enforcement and as a larger community together, as part of the Human Trafficking Task Force, our nonprofits, to work together to empower them, to make them survivors, to stabilize them so that we can seek a prosecution, because without a victim, we don't have a case. And one of the number one reasons why we won't have a successful outcome in a human trafficking case is because of lack of cooperation or stabilization of the victim.
Oh my goodness, wow. It really shows how the community at large is so vital. All of these agencies and organizations working together in a trauma-informed way, and we have to hold these predators and traffickers accountable. I think as a society we want to hold them accountable, and we hear a lot of discussion about that. I know all four of us do. Francine, can you give us an overview of the state attorney's office role in these cases?
Well, just starting with what Sergeant Williams said, we first have to be visible in the community, awareness about human trafficking, and be involved with all the players that are trying to eradicate human trafficking. But our most defined role clearly is holding the traffickers accountable within the criminal justice system. So we become involved in the case as soon as law enforcement makes us aware of the investigation, and we start with legal support and all the way through jury trial.
Oh, wow. So in working with victims through the legal process, how important do you feel a trauma-informed approach is?
We have to have the knowledge of what these victims are going through. We have to have training on multiple different types of trauma that these victims have experienced, because we have to build trust with the victims in addition to focusing on the law and bringing them through and be prepared for a jury trial. So for instance, a victim, we have to understand as prosecutors, they may remember things in fragments, they remember them in different sequences, and it may take a lot of time for them to fully remember and visualize all of the events that have occurred to them over the years. When we start a case, we are starting a case and it may take a whole year to go to trial, if not more, but their victimization started years prior. So we have to be very much aware of that. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to get the case through to a jury trial. And without a jury trial, we're not going to be able to hold the traffickers accountable for their crimes.
So you were mentioning a trauma-informed approach and how vital that is. What are some of the practices that the state attorney's office follows?
Well, we start out with, we try to meet with the victim, but we don't talk about the abuse when we meet them initially. We meet them with a victim's advocate, with somebody that they trust. Maybe it's the detective that comes with them, somebody who's had that ongoing relationship with them. We've just popped into their lives, right? And so we have to build that trust with them. We try not to conduct multiple interviews. We try to make sure that they're in counseling. But we have to give them that security, those resources. That's why we have the advocates there. So first we need to know they're safe and that they're in treatment and that we are there to support them in the courtroom. And we will absolutely do that. But it's that trust that has to go both ways. So the prosecutors has to be trained as well as the victims need the resources available to them.
So Joanne, Francine was talking a lot, and Wade, about these programs that kind of have to be there for victims to support them. As survivors arrive at Into the Jordan, which is an amazing program that you guys have, they're in trauma. So, what are some of the things that you've done to create a safe space for them when they arrive?
Yeah, so we offer a drop-in center, and the women know that they can come there. It's a judgment-free zone. And first of all, we want to get their basic needs met, right? So if they need food, or if they need something to drink, or they need just to rest, we have, a couch where they can just take a nap. But we want to meet them where they are. And like Francine said, we have to build that trust, So, we say that we're there for the long haul. We are there to advocate for them. We are there to mentor them, to disciple them, and to help them to create the life that they deserve. We offer lots of different resources, help to connect them with lots of different resources so that they can get out of this life and that they can, move forward and be healthy.
So what are some of the things that you attribute to a survivor finding stability?
I think the number one key to building resilience is through mentorship. Like Francine said, they have to have that trust, right? And when they come to us at Into the Jordan, we offer them a safe place. We offer them judgment-free zone. And then, when they start to build, we start to build that relationship, and then they can start to open up. And we can really help them with life skills, which are so important because many of them, they didn't grow up in a stable environment. They didn't have parents that would teach them these important skills. I mean, as simple as, making a phone call to, address a problem, or how to, for self-care and those kinds of things. So we offer that on a weekly basis, life skill groups, mentorships, discipleship. We offer advocacy, like I've said before, I think, and also a work study program so that they can kind of learn those soft skills in a safe place. Because many of our survivors, when they go out into the workforce, because they suffer from complex trauma, oftentimes if something goes wrong, then they immediately get agitated, right? Things escalate very quickly, and it's difficult for them to keep a job. So when they do our work study program, we can kind of help them to work through that, go through these different levels and teach them conflict resolution in addition to those other soft skills that are so important out in the workforce.
Wow. So Francine, how important are these stabilizing programs to the prosecution?
Well, they're pretty much necessary. We need the victim to grow, not be further traumatized by the process. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to hold the traffickers accountable and help these victims move forward with their lives. But they can't do that through the criminal justice system. They need Into the Jordan and groups like that to love them and to treat them properly. As a prosecutor, we can respect them. We can insist that everybody else respect them. There'll be no doubt. However, they really need life skills and just a place to go.
So today we've really heard that justice and healing require many agencies, organizations, resources, and caring people working together in a trauma-informed way. A survivor's journey is not just a sprint, but rather requires a lot of patience. Thank you for sharing your insight with us today to help us better understand the value of a trauma-informed approach when working with sex trafficking survivors. We're going to have additional resources in the description of this video, so please make sure you take advantage of that and continue to educate yourself. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Real Talk.